Your Royal Highness, welcome. Good to see you again here on Fox News.
Good afternoon. Good to see you again.
Yeah, of course. Let's start with, what do you think the Biden administration should do? What can the administration do that it's not doing now to try and get the message to Tehran to stop its terrorist ways?
First and foremost, Eric, what I would like to point to is that every time the position of a U.S. administration, regardless of whether it's a Republican or a Democrat one, has been tough and strong vis-a-vis the regime has tactically retreated and calmed down in terms of its hostile or aggressive behavior. There's a direct correlation between the two. And every time there's been a soft position or not enough pressure, they took advantage of it and got emboldened to take further actions. Example, what happened a while ago with the Hamas attack against Israel. The proxies are operating as usual. The regime is, of course, funding and training them, trying to create more regional havoc and instability, and at the same time get all the credit they can by what the proxies do without necessarily taking directly the hit or the blame. What needs to shift, therefore, is far more pressure on the regime. That's the only way to push them back. That's not enough to solve the entire problem, but that's a start.
It seems, though, that maybe the opposite, in a way, is being done. Look, when the administration releases, $6 billion in oil revenue, there's $10 billion in electricity bill from Iraq that they could get at the same time. Is that the way to handle Iran?
We have sanctions in the books against the regime, oil sanctions among them, which were not, in fact, implemented, meaning that the regime had access to nearly $90 billion of money, more than they should have received. And, of course, they're going to use it to their purposes and solidifying even further their activities in the region. So just by imposing the sanctions that have been called for, you can maintain the pressure. I would even say you can increase the pressure. Let's not forget that the chief operator is the IRGC, both at home and abroad. And the IRGC, as far as America's allies in Europe are concerned, have yet to be put on the list of terrorist organizations. That would be an additional step to further limit and curb the regime's ability to maintain repression at home and continue a campaign of aggression abroad.
Why do you think that's not being done? You know, why do you think they're not being put on the terrorist list? I mean, because they took the Houthis off and then they put them back on after these attacks.
Well, the Houthis were unlisted, and of course, next thing is what you just pointed out. I mean, obviously, this is not the way to deal with terrorism in general, and as such, I think that it requires tough leadership, strong leadership, and the decision to really take the bull by the horn, as opposed to retaliate only by very cautiously, even pre-announce that, well, we're not going to do X, Y, and Z. That's not a tactic to follow. But then again, I think the strategists and people like that should really advise much better than they have so far what this administration needs to do to at least try to reduce the problem.
Soleimani, of course, former President Trump assassinated him, ordered that drone attack on him when Soleimani was at the Baghdad airport, and now his successor, Kwani, he was at the Baghdad airport last week and went in for meetings. Do you think there should be an assassination program against some of these Iranian top leaders? Would that put them back on their heels?
Well, certainly when Soleimani was killed, it almost brought to a halt executions back home. The regime took a very strong message. Actually, there's a graph that you should check out between the number of executions in Iran between the Obama administration and the Biden administration was literally cut to half. And that was because of a much stronger position by the U.S. administration under President Trump. The numbers have increased again. Again, to that effect, the more there's tacit pressure or certainly retaliation should, and after the 3 Americans unfortunately were killed, we saw the retaliation, and that brought a lesser aggression or even minimizing their attempts of attacks against American personnel and troops. It shows that toughness does work to some extent. But our problem is not going to be resolved by the regime simply slowing down on its aggression. We need to put an end to the regime once and for all. It is the source of the problem. It is the source of financing, funding, radicalism, nuclear threat, you name it. Everything is somehow connected to this regime. And ultimately, I think the solution should not be anymore the pursuit of something that has been done for 40 years by Western government, which is an expectation of behavior change by a regime that in its DNA simply cannot be different than what it is. And ultimately, side with the Iranian people who are the solution, who are like-minded, who have the very same values of freedom and democracy and human rights. And it's time that we start helping David against this Goliath and give David a chance.
And where can people go to get more information for you and to try to help who are watching now?
I'm sorry, say again, Eric.
Where can people go? What can they do now, in 20 seconds left, to help?
You mean people? I think the most important element, and I think the use of social media will be able to give so much more information that is accessible if you only hear what the Iranian people are asking for, and in what way anybody could help and contribute to boost their ability to succeed in their campaign for freedom.